All right, okay, so I'm here with Rohan Smith this morning, okay? So Rohan Smith is a rugby league coach from Australia. I think most people on this side of the world will have heard of the Bradford Bulls. Rohan is a former head coach of the Bradford Bulls. He's also worked with the New Zealand Warriors, and he's now working with the Devils in Queensland, Australia. Welcome onto the show, Rohan.
Thanks for having me, man. Always good to catch up for a yarn.
Absolutely. Now, Rohan is one of these unique individuals that Rohan loves to talk about coaching. And I mean all sorts of coaching, from American sports, from basketball to baseball to American football, and obviously to the sports that are native to his home country. But he has a unique perspective and a unique thought process based around coaching. And the crux of our chat this morning is going to be based around coaching. And I suppose, first of all, Rohan, are we over-sciencing coaching? Are we over-sciencing everything when it comes to how we're dealing with players now? So, like, we know what best practices are. We have all this information. We have all this technology, from GPS to heart rate monitoring to subjective markers of monitoring training loads and so forth. But are we losing these softer skills of actually being able to walk onto a field or walk into a court and deal with the person as opposed to an objective data set or a set of numbers? So are we over-sciencing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess there's lots of ways to answer that question, but probably it depends a little bit on where your background lies in coaching and how you were brought up with coaching. That those that came in sort of before the science really kicked in hard, and even now there's coaching courses at university and studies end-on-end studies about coaching. 20, 30, 40 years ago, maybe that wasn't the case. Certainly when I started coaching, GPS wasn't in. I was still cutting video from VHS to VHS was my method of compiling footage to show players. DVD quickly came in early in my professional career. But I would say that a lot of coaches and a lot of professional environments that I'm aware of are very much going down that almost HR side of having to justify every single action by some numerical data, where, as you said, man, we're dealing with, in the team sports world, like I'm dealing with 100 plus players here, where I'm the manager of the club. In the preseason, we've got 3 grades here, 120 players here on a given day. The numbers are great help. They support things, but yeah, the personal side of it and putting people before players is always, something that I've probably evolved into as a coach, and becoming a parent probably helps you to understand that people first process as well a little bit, I reckon.
Yeah, I think that certainly does. Like, when you have when you're a parent, then you build a certain level of empathy, right? There's always a great story that I had. I think I was at a course one time, and someone mentioned Richard Simmons. Have you ever heard of Richard Simmons?
No, I'm not familiar.
So, like, he was this, back in America, back in the 80s and the 90s, he was this fitness guru, so to speak, right? But, like, people laughed at Richard Simmons, right? He had kind of like goofy hair and he wore like spandex leotard. But, like, Richard Simmons, he had his own television show, right? And I think his ultimate goal at one stage was to help people lose something like 1 million pounds in weight, right? But, like, he had no formal education, he had no formal fitness degree, he had no sports science degree, he had nothing like that. But he was, at one time in his life, 250 pounds or something. And he would sit down with people and they would sit side by side. He'd put his arm around them and he would cry with people, okay? So he would just simply cry and they would speak and he would listen. And he had that connection to that person because he knew what it was like to be 250 pounds. So he had something deeper than sympathy. And the thing about it, like, I was never 250 pounds. So I could be sympathetic towards someone who's 250 pounds. But he had empathy. He knew what it was like to be that weight. and he built that deeper connection with that person, right? No science. And like, you know, as coaches, sometimes we think that people want to know, you know what I mean, what Gibbs free energy is and what the Krebs cycle is and blah, blah, blah. People really don't care about that. People want that connection and they want that trust. And like, as I say, people in my industry laughed at Richard Simmons, but he possibly helped more people than, you know what I mean, thousands of lads with sports science degrees combined, because he had that deeper level of connection. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are around building connection with athletes.
Yeah, well, like I'm a studier of coaches. I wasn't an elite player myself. I grew up with a family that were professional players. My dad and my uncle, both professional players in the NRL, and then both professional coaches in the NRL for 30 years in my dad's case. And my uncle Tony, he coaches in Hull KR in the English Super League currently. He's been a professional coach since he finished playing in the mid-90s. So I grew up around professional coaching. But I've also studied it because I wasn't a great player, so I couldn't lean on my skills as a player to get me by in the coaching world. So I studied coaches, and all of the best ones, or the most interesting, or the most successful ones that I've come across, it's all about building those relationships. Like, why do, you know, San Antonio Spurs are one of the best examples. Like Coach Popovich, he's overseen elite players move on, like Hall of Fame players move on, then the next one moves on, the next one moves on, and he's still winning more games than what he's expected to every year. And it's about relationship. It's about building connection. For myself, the book that sort of opened me up to it, and I wasn't ready for it at the time. It's probably about 15 years ago. I read Sacred Hoops, which is Phil Jackson. And empathy was a big part of what he was doing, and breath and mindfulness and connecting through that stuff. Like, that was how he connected to his players. He had some, like, he knew his basketball, but he had some assistant coaches that were pushing the triangle offense, which again, team-based offense to help superstars win. But that was about building connection through breath. You know, people still laugh about that in the sports world, or they like, oh yeah, we've started meditating. Like Phil Jackson was doing that with Michael Jordan 25 years ago, and it was good enough then for the best player. You know, why aren't we building those connections? So for me, learning off the elite coaches that have sustained their success for long periods of time, picking up things like that to bring into my own being. Now, I wasn't ready for that book back then, but now I'm that's easy. That's easy. Building connection for me now as a head coach is also different to what it was as an assistant coach. So, and even as a younger coach, I was a 21-year-old kid as a kind of apprentice coach in a NRL environment where I didn't know much. I had to try and prove myself by learning the game and showing everyone that I knew the game. When now it's a lot about building that relationship. As a head coach, it's easy because I get to do the recruitment. When I was at the Bradford Bulls, we turned over a lot of players in a very short period of time. So I was able to find players that were going to be on the path with us. So to build that connection, you have that honest face-to-face conversation. Now, a lot of coaches and player managers want to do that discussion over the phone. And I mean, now the video stuff that we're all doing at the moment is a much better connection than just talking over the phone, seeing the face-to-face. But there's nothing quite like going to meet a player, sitting down, sharing a meal, or having a coffee, a cup of tea. As you do in the North, you can't have a meeting without a cup of tea. I had more cups of tea in that period at Bradford than I'd had in my whole life combined. But the connection of chatting through some stuff, and I always ask players like, hey, is there some stuff I need to know here? And I tell them about me. I share some of my own sort of vulnerability or experiences in life to try and build that connection and break down some barriers from the very first conversation, which then lets them in. They know me a bit, and in some cases, they just open up straight away in those situations. I usually ask guys towards the end of a conversation when I know I'm pretty much sure I'm going to offer them a contract, or I already know that they're going to come based on the conversation. I always ask them about, is there something I should know here that I can help you with? Drugs, gambling, sex, financial issues, anything that's a problem, like are the police chasing you, is there a warrant out for your arrest? I ask those questions, and, guys, of course, can answer truthfully or not. It's up to them. But in most cases, guys will say, oh, actually, I've had a bit of trouble with drugs, or gambling's been an issue for me. So straight away, you've got that deeper level connection. And it's not like we haven't even spoken that much about playing or your skills as a player. Now, I do also, the other way of building the connection in that very initial chat is I tell them what I like about their game. And this is why I want you to come and be a Devil or be a Bradford Bull. This is why I want you here. And then depending on the person and where they're at in their career, I also talk about these are the things that I feel my staff can help you with on your journey. And this is how we're going to go about helping you on your journey. And I think in that situation, if you show people there that you've done your research, you've done your homework, you care about them, and it's about them, that the connection is reasonably good, straight up. And if you've intimidated or if you've scared anyone off by having that sort of deeper conversation, and it's happened. Like I've had plenty of those chats where you're literally just getting to know someone, and I'll walk away from that going, nah, that guy's he's not ready for this, or he's not, he's not going to be interested in this approach, which that's great because you just stop wasting time. Yeah.
And like once you've built that connection with players, okay, and once you have players on board with you, is there any other there's areas within the setup that I find is good in terms of, gaining a kind of a feedback loop? For example, the physio table is always a really good place where players will open up. So as a head coach, or in my case, as a performance coach, or I hate using the term S&C coach, but I always try to keep a connection or keep a good communication line with the two physios, because I know that, players have that possibly more one-on-one time with the physios. Plus, if a player is in a physio room, there is an issue as well, right? So that's when they're vulnerable. That's when they feel exposed. There's nothing worse for a player to feel like, being injured is psychologically a very, very tough time on players, because, you're psychologically dealing with the fact that in your eyes, you have now stagnated in your own eyes, and everyone else is pushing on and progressing. And in that area or time of vulnerability, a lot of players have that opportunity and take that opportunity to open up to the physios while they're on the table, right? So have you ever used, like that, an example, other avenues to gain a deeper understanding of players?
Yeah, that's awesome. Like that's such an efficient way of getting the read for the overall playing group. Sometimes for me as a skills or overseeing the whole program coach, I'll lean on the S&C coaches who are touching base with them about how their body's feeling and how they've recovered from the last session or that kind of stuff. Definitely the physio. In our situation, our physio doesn't spend as much time on premise as some of our other coaches, but in other places that I've been, that's a pretty well-worn, successful way of doing things. Like have a tight relationship with your physio where he will let you know, or she will let you know that guy's dealing with some stuff maybe away from the, without feeling like they're giving up that confidentiality as well. I've been in some places where the physio feels like they can't reveal anything, even the injury, to the coach because it's confidential physio-patient relationship kind of thing where, you've got to have that balance in the sports world. In the corporate world, maybe you can do that, but in the sports world, you can't have that relationship. For us, and a big part of what I sort of have had a bit of success with in the couple of organisations where I've been the leader is to say hello to everyone. Whoever you see, if you're a player or staff member, you go and say hello to everyone, and you ask them, you say hello or you say, how's your day? And in our case, we're training of an evening. So the guys have had some kind of experience through the day, whether it be good, bad, tough, easy, hot, cold, whatever it is, that even just asking that question and how they respond to that, their body language, that usually tells you whether there's something worth following up there. So I do my very best every session to at least have touch base, and we greet each other with a shake hands and a say hello. And I always say to our staff, and I have to remind myself sometimes, because I've got this, these thoughts about that player's game or what happened on the weekend or what might happen on the next game. Sometimes I'm like, hey, I just want to talk about this straight away. And I'm like, whoa, got to rewind and go, hey, man, how's your day? How's the wife? How's the kids? Get that little connection, like rebuild. I think you can have, like, I've got some very close relationships that go beyond actually verbally communicating stuff with some of my players here. Like, some of them I don't talk to in conversation that, for hours on end or anything like that, but I know there's a deep sort of connection. But I think it's really important to try and rebuild that connection every time you see someone. So it's not you just taking it off from where you finish. You actually go and say high five or say hello, and that can tell you a lot about where a guy is at for the day. So
yeah,
treating the person first before the player, and all of the stuff. Like if you're a visitor here and you come in, at the end of it, you're like, oh man, like 100 people just said hello to me and asked me how my day was. It's like, whoa, but it becomes what you do, like you don't walk in with your head down and just get stuck into the first exercise. You get around and say hello. And that was actually in the north of England, there's a lot of guys that sort of they're a bit dour at times, I reckon. Like, I love the English people, but there was kids, I stood in the corridor at Bradford Bulls one day. So the new batch of under 16s were coming in, and I just stood in the corridor and I waited to see how many guys would actually either look at me and say hello or actually go out of their way and shake hands or greet me in some fashion. And out of the 25 or 30 or whatever, there was like literally one or two. So I said to the boss there, John Bastian, and the head of the youth program, I said, man, can I come in and have a yarn to the kids about how things work? If you're a bull, this is how you behave. So I go in, have a yarn to them and say, just asking you, when you see someone, you say hello. Could be a nod, could be a handshake, could be just a up or whatever the local lingo is. The next thing that happened, I went back to my office and I was doing something, and next thing there was a kid knocked on my door and he says, I'm such and such. I forget the kid's name. That was the first one. He knocks on the door and says, I'm such and such and I'm from here and I play for this club. Just wanted to come and introduce myself. I'm like, oh, right, awesome, man. I'll catch up. I'll look forward to watching you train. Then another kid came in, did the same thing. And then another one. And then another one. And I went, hey, how many blokes are out there now? And they all, I brought them all into a relatively small office, and there was like 25, 30 dudes in there. And I said, hey, dudes, does this feel better now that we have some kind of connection? I don't know your mum's name. I don't know your background, but we've had a conversation. Like, those connections for me, for those under 16s kids, I've had a couple of those kids. One of those kids actually came to North Devils to play under 20s last year because he dropped me a line and said, hey, man, thinking about coming to Australia for a year to try and play rugby league. What do you think? And I'm like, yeah, cool, man. Like, I remember you're a good kid. Way you go. So you just never know. Like, and I guess that's something my old man always taught me. You never know where those kind of conversations or those little connections you never know where they'll go, where they'll take you in life, what they can do for you.
That's really, really, really relevant, isn't it? Like, I have a thing called the 10-second rule, right? Where I'm just trying to, we have a panel of 36 players, plus backroom, plus management. plus support staff as well. So invariably, the manager will want you for something, right? You have your skills coaches. Now you'll have your sessions planned before training, but they'll always want to alter something or touch base on something. You'll have your selectors who'll definitely want to touch base on some player. You'll have to touch base with your physio. Invariably, you're going to have 2 to 3 players who are on some form of return to play protocol during the session. So they're not doing a session. And then you'll have between 30 and 34 generally, right, at a given session. So I'll always try to have 10 seconds where I'll just fly around and shake hands. How are you doing? How was your day? How was college? How was work? How was business? Whatever it is. But invariably, and this is what I kind of want to move on to now, you'll have players who will, some players will say, yeah, all cool. And more players then will just open up. It's like a tsunami. Oh, yeah. And what you'll find is, okay, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, you're here 2 minutes, you're standing up, training has to go, and you need to get cracking, right? Now, I'm always a big believer that, people are more important than cones. And, even though I'll have every player's wellness marker from that morning, they will have logged in. I will know how, subjectively how they rated their prepness to go for training that evening. I'll have their GPS. I'll have their weekly training load by the end of the week. I'll have their monthly training load from 3 weeks before that. I will have their overall volume based on the GPS results. So I'll have all this objective data, right? But I still value that 10 seconds before every session as high, or if not higher, than those data sets. However, in terms of, I suppose, putting a character type on all of those different players, because that 10 seconds means different things to those different players, right? For some of them, as I said, it's a thumbs up. Other lads, it's a chance to just open up a tsunami of how they're feeling, right? Have you an actual character type of different personality types for a situation like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've done a little bit of that sort of profiling. We use the color code profiling, which, as much as for the coaches to use, it actually helped the players to know themselves a little bit more. We haven't gone too much into it as far as the players directly knowing what color the other guys are and what they're maybe likely to exhibit as behaviors or motives, or but knowing if somebody, once you know the individuals particularly, and if you're aware of what kind of character they are, not just the gut feel type character or the visible signs of how he behaves, but once you know a little bit, whether it's that color code profiling or there's other ones that are effective there. If somebody says, oh, actually, and he doesn't normally, so I've got some guys here, the guys that come up white on the color code, like those guys are zero maintenance. They don't need much. They don't need much from you. But like some of those guys I've got a very close relationship or connection with, but they don't need much maintenance. They don't need you to check in too much, the guys that we have anyway. But if they say something on a day, straight away. So if I'm not running a drill, I'll get that guy out and use that minute or two, particularly if it's in that sort of prep aspect of the start of the session, depending on how you operate your sessions. Those prep times are often about covering your bases as much as essential. So if they miss a minute or two because you're having a conversation, like that could save them an injury. It could be the good intervention that you need. Hey man, why don't you just go do some weights tonight and not worry too much about the running because, you've had a hard day at work or you've been pushed the wheelbarrow for 10 hours or whatever it is. I think it's to do with, and the same goes with someone that's always got a problem. If you know that they've always got something or they want to talk to you about something, you can get that relationship to the point where you're like, hey man, is this something new or you're good to go? And then they'll say, no, I'm good. Like we'll chat about it later. So I often, if I know something's up with a guy, I'll either tell him not to come at all, I'll ask him, hey, what do you want to do tonight? Because I believe if you get to our facility, our environment, even if you've had a bad day for whatever reason, you're going to feel better having come and been around people and got moving. That I'll ask him, what do you want to do tonight? And it's not a trick. It's not a test. Some guy's got a tight hamstring or his legs are just gassed from whatever. It's not a test for him to say, oh, man, I appreciate, like, if I could not do that hard running session today. I think you got to have confidence in your ability to read people. And that comes from the relationship, but also you can see a person, you can see what's going on in their eyes more than what their actual words are, in my experiences. So once you've got a little bit of a feel and you have some success in reading people, then you can back your instincts and your judgment. And that takes time. And I can imagine that's why a lot of the greatest coaches in sport have been able to maintain things for, well into their years. Wenger and Alex Ferguson and guys like that are old men, but they're able, Wayne Bennett's the greatest coach in rugby league history, sort of on stats. He's well in his 60s. Those guys they must be strong at that relationship stuff, because they can't have the same energy or enthusiasm, vigor that us young guys can have, but they must be tight on that connection. They have to be.
Yeah, it's and like, I think a big turning point for me was, realizing that every person needs something different from me. You know what I mean? Like, they're all coming to the table and they all need something different, even though the commonality is the sport and the goals might be common in terms of the team environment and the team objectives, and in many cases the outcomes, but individually they all need something different, right? And to me, the biggest, I guess, visual of that is during video analysis. You see some guys and they're eating it up and their mouths are open and you can see that they're taking it in, and you can visibly see other lads and that they're just 3/4 asleep. You know what I mean? That it's going over their head, So even in terms of video analysis, it, in many ways, some people would say that it's highly decontextualized because you're not on the field, right? And more people will say, well, if a picture paints 1,000 words, a video paints X amount of words. Where do you sit on that and taking that personality profile into a video analysis scenario?
Yeah, well, I guess you're looking at the learning styles as well as the character type. And, in our situation, you're factoring in guys that have been working all day, and then you're trying to review a game, of an evening. In the NRL or the professional, rugby league sense that I've been in, most players haven't been good in the classroom kind of environment. They didn't like most of the aspects of school. So they kind of almost without intentionally doing it, they sit down and go, like their brain's telling them that this is school again. And your presentation style and how you go about it is huge. How long you spend. Sometimes, also understanding that the guy that looks like he's half asleep, he might be the one that's listening the most. So understanding your dudes inside out, and the easy way of, working that out is that guy actually listening with his head down, or is he just asking him a question? Finding the right balance. Some guys can get a good job done reviewing their game, really quickly, a couple of key points. Some guys are students of the game. They want to know everything. Which one are you talking to? The team review session, I've moved away from that quite a bit in this semi-professional environment. Even when I was at Bradford, we weren't doing, they were like 10-minute sort of reviews as a team in general, like punchy, but we were doing more work as group stuff or individuals. So I say to players each week, you might need one nod, one wink, one word, one sit down, one call, or you might need 1 hour. Whatever you need, that's what I'm here for. So it's up to you to be accountable for what do you need. And so I know that I can sort of follow up and go, hey man, have you got that covered? And trust them to do that. But in your video sessions and online, the online portals now are providing that opportunity to spend more time on me. So if your video session's going for 10 minutes, but of that 10 minutes, only 2 or 3 minutes is actually allocated to me, you know, to my game directly where I'm involved, that's not best bang for buck either, but at least the 10 minutes is not going, you know, that's not an hour. If you do a 30-minute, hour-long review for the sake of the team to know, you know, to get the same messages across to everyone, dudes are going to be gone, because when you're talking about defensive plays or the goalkeeper or the fullback or whatever, the other guys that are miles away from the ball, even though they're still involved and they still need to know what's happening in the game and understand the game, they're not fully engaged. Like that's human nature. If we're talking about you, Adrian, and it's just me talking to you in that whole team review, you'll probably stay focused. But as soon as I drift off you and start talking about some other aspect of the game that doesn't feature you as heavily, well, it's human nature to go, oh, okay, well, what else can I concentrate on because I'm not needed here, you know?
Yeah. And how much do you think lighting, environment, all play into that? Like what I've noticed is, like here in Ireland, you know, our league is in January and February. Invariably, if we're doing video, it's going to be dark outside. You know what I mean? The environment is different. The lights are dimmed down. You have a projector onto a screen. And I always notice that when the lights are turned back on, you almost have this collective groan, and you know what I mean? It actually brings me back nearly to a classroom scenario, you know? So how much do you think that plays into it?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing you need to do is turn the heaters off and turn the air conditioning on to keep people alert. You know, that's an old school teacher trick for sure. Lighting definitely is in effect, and you can use it for a positive. If you're using it for like lights, camera, bang, this is how we play. Welcome to the Devils, day one of preseason. Then no lights and all vision can be great. You know, when it's going for not long and the music's blaring, that kind of effect can be huge. But when you're about and looking to get some feedback, sitting in the dark is like no good. We've got a really good setup here. We've got an interactive whiteboard that the lights in our gym can stay on. There can actually be people walking around in the background. So it's got a bit of people that still lift and not, you know, as long as they're not dropping too much weight. But it's got a little bit more like a relaxed kind of feel that I think that trying to get them away from that classroom sensation, light is definitely a factor. We actually did some stuff through the preseason when we were talking about or introducing an aspect of play or a bit about our identity as a team, showing some footage where the vision was just pretty much rolling, not too much interaction. We were getting them to hold a plate or sit in a squat, couch stretch for as long as they could, to try and get a little bit of challenging that focus on what you're actually presenting. So when those thoughts of, oh, that's starting to hurt, it actually triggered them to refocus on what the content was. And then the follow-up to that was, after the session, send me your best 2 or best 3, whatever it was, key attributes about the Devil's identity, or send me something that hit home for you during that time, where we're actually, one, trying to sneak in a bit of mobility or strength in some way, but distract them from what was happening so that they had to refocus. Because that's, what we do in the games. It doesn't matter what sport we're playing. We're constantly getting distracted by something: referee, weather, fatigue, collision, disappointment, outcome, whatever. They're trying to get that refocus. So I had a crack at that. That's the first time I've really done that, semi-consistently, to try and add some quality to those review or preview sort of conversations.
Excellent. And in terms of bringing your communication for a specific training session, right? So what strategy would you have for that? Would you be, communicate through WhatsApp the morning of a session? Would you bring a whiteboard out onto a field the day of a session? Is it a quick brief inside in the dressing room 5 minutes before you hit the field? So, you know what I mean? What's your individual thoughts and practices there?
Yeah, I've had a crack at all of those things. In our environment now, we have the session plan posted. Most guys are here sort of an hour or more, before the scheduled training starts. So there's plenty of time for them to check it out. It doesn't matter how much or how little detail. Some guys just don't understand words or don't want to understand the words. So they're just happy to wait and see what happens on the field and follow the crowd. But I've found that by posting what the session entails, that at least some of the guys are very clear about what the drill is once it's introduced or once we get started, that the others follow. And that's how some guys learn best anyway, by getting the visual. Oh, okay, that's what the drill is. Bang, I'm into it. But they might not remember what the drill's called, but as soon as they see, they've got it covered. So for us, two of our sessions never look the same as far as content goes, because I want our guys to be challenged and try and be more adaptable. The structure might stay the same. So if we have 4 3-minute rotations of a certain skill, they will never be the same skills or the same activities in each of them from one session to the next. Or even, that Monday session will never look the same as the Monday following, because I don't want players to think, oh yeah, we've got this next. I think that's not, I understand there's research into that stuff about if people know what's coming, it's easy for them. There's not 4 new drills all the time. They're things they've done before. They know them, but they have to actually click into, which one's that again? Oh, yep. So we're challenging that adaptability and that recognition and awareness and a bit of communication to get into the drill, rather than go, oh yeah, we've got that again. That's something that I'm really conscious of. So having the session plan available to them, our under 20s coaches, they share that stuff through WhatsApp group. I did a few times. I did a couple of videos. Like if there's something strategic or really topical, or I'm introducing something, I'll put a couple of minute video together, share that. Most dudes have watched at least some of the video. That makes the session run easier on the field. But we have it visible, it's accessible. But at the end of the day, it's up to the player to work out a little bit what's going to work best for him as well. If he spends 5 minutes trying to decipher the session plan, he might have been better off doing 5 minutes of passing or mobility or something instead of that. Where for other guys are going to take the lead by, I'll spend 5 minutes on that because I'm going to help operate this session or take charge of it. Well, that might be better than the 5 minutes of mobility for that guy,
Yeah, makes sense. There's a couple of things there on that as you were talking that kind of bounced into my head that I wanted to bounce off you. So I'll try to remember them. I suppose first of all is I've often named small-sided games, right? So like if you're too aware of how things work in Ireland in terms of GAA, right? So I'm with an inter-county team, right? So I've often named our small-sided games and labeled them the clubs that the lads come from, if that makes sense. So let's just say I'm from Kilmallock, so I've often said, right lads, the name of this small-sided game is Kilmallock. So that the lads have, obviously I have outlined the learning objectives and, what we're trying to get from and how it's representative of whatever scenario in the actual game itself. So the lads have a common language or a trigger around, okay, we're doing Kilmallock, right? We know what that's about. As opposed to saying, right lads, we're doing that 4v3 drill where the objective is bang, bang. So I find things flow a little bit easier, right? But just in terms of in the session, right? As a skills coach, how much do you use small-sided games that are reflective and representative of a certain scenario in the game itself through your coaching? Are you know what I mean? I know we're not talking about skills versus drills and blah, blah, but just like small-sided games have become very, very popular in recent years, originally from soccer, but now they've become very, very popular in mainstream sport. As an S&C coach, now I've used that, and again, I'll say it again, I don't like that term, but I'm always trying to drive the physiological adaptations as much as I can through small-sided games, even though I'm well aware of their drawbacks as well and their limitations, because they have some, and we can talk about them in a minute. But as in terms of your practice, how much do you use them? When do you use them? And have you anything you can add to that?
Yeah, that's a really good thing. There's been a big push in the sports world around making everything, decision making and reactive, and we don't train as much as professional teams. We don't do 2-hour sessions on a weeknight. We'll do an hour on the field, an hour in the gym, and that's we're trying to get best bang for buck in that time, that 2-hour sort of period, maybe 2.5, on occasion. So I've probably moved away a little bit from small-sided games, just trying to get best bang for buck. So we need to be a team. So I need to get an element of team activity done, and the way that we play our sport is different to how a lot of other teams are playing, where there's more dependence on team concepts and teamwork rather than individual brilliance, I guess, is probably more, the easy way to put it. So in our 1-hour field sessions, I'm really stressing the emphasis on and the density of skills at the start of the session. So if there's a 12-minute block of 4 3-minute skills blocks, they are essentially similar in conditioning value to small-sided games, but it might be I'm constantly passing for those 3 minutes, and I'm getting a lot more touches of the ball than I would if I was playing a small-sided game. So there's a lot more density to the actual practice of a certain skill, rather than, even if you're in a I'm not sure how small your small-sided games can go down to, but we can play some 3-on-3 and get a benefit all the way up to, once it gets past 7 or 8-on-8, it loses. You might as well do 13-on-13, which is our team activity. I'm trying to get best bang for buck from a conditioning point of view, from a skill development point of view, and a team point of view. So I've sacrificed a little bit of small-sided games. So I've got a big belief in it. Like I love them, but you can't do everything. We've done more sort of wrestle-based work this year than we had in the past. So some of the small-sided games was complemented by wrestling, which is a great conditioning tool for our sport, equally as much as what a conditioning game is. So getting the best bang for buck and what are you about as a team is important, and then working back from there. So we'll do a lot more practice of those finer skills and the execution of what people say basic skills or fundamentals. We do a lot more than that, than what NRL teams do, and what a lot of other competitions at our level do. They use it like presumed knowledge, where I never presume. I want to sharpen it all the time. So, and I see, Steph Curry, if he's good enough to practice his dribbling for 30 minutes before a game, every game, and he's elite. Kobe Bryant was good enough to shoot his 300 or 500 makes or whatever he made on the last day of his 20-year NBA career, uncontested shots. He was still practicing that stuff. Well, if that has merit, in every sport, I believe. Now, there's been a big push in the research world about getting away from that and making it just, don't worry about how you catch the ball, just catch the ball and react, and having that game sense. I feel like I'm a good teacher of rugby league, so I can sacrifice a little bit of that reactive game sense to make it more reactive, skill focused. If that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. And in addition to that, I suppose what we don't have in GAA and what you have in the NRL and in rugby league is obviously the physicality and the attrition of contacts. So, you know what I mean, in terms of managing the workload of players and having an energetic cost of contacts and opening up the windows for potential injuries, I suppose that probably is a a consideration when using small-sided games and training as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, a lot of our small-sided games in rugby league, the contact will be, or the full contact or collision or combat, I call that, because that's what it is when it gets serious. We take the combat out. There might be some bumping into each other, might be some wrestle, but not the full, I'm trying to hurt you sort of routine. Most of that is taken out of the small-sided games. When you're doing small-sided games in rugby league sense, you're probably doing it more to get the intensity of speed or accelerations, the quantity of accelerations within a period of time, the meters per minute, all that kind of stuff. So as soon as you add too much collision or wrestle into the game, into that small-sided game, you lose the running elements anyway. So they tend to get a little bit I don't agree with it and I don't practice that way, but a lot of the stuff in rugby league sort of gets done like wrestle is over there as a block. And then we're going to do our game speed training over here where it's, we're trying to get X amount of accelerations or meters per minute, as I said, distance, whatever. They're separated, where we're trying to really bring it back together where they overlap, where if we're doing a small-sided game or some kind of running drill, that it's interspersed with collision, wrestle, and those collisions can be monitored. So like when we start in November, I'm not about full contact. Like contact's not contact. There's graded very levels. It's like running. Running's not running. You can be running fast or you can be just ticking it over and everywhere in between. So we use contact, the same analogies with contact as we do with our, our periodization of our running work.
Okay, very good. It's periodization. I think that it's ironic enough. If this year, yeah, if this year can teach us anything, it can teach.
Show me one of those pretty graphs that show what you're going to do in 10 months' time. You know what the content of that session is going to be. Yeah. I'm all for planning. Don't get me wrong. I love planning.
Yeah, I think that to enter each week and each session with a plan in mind, but then to be versatile enough to react to what walks in the door to you, I think that's periodization.
Big time, man. And how did your team react to a close game on the weekend where you played in the mud as opposed to, one quick story on that. We played at Bradford at the back end of my 2016 season there. We won a lot of games by a lot and we were scoring a lot of long-range tries. They were really nice tries. We were scoring out of it, coming off our own try line. And we had a fullback and a 5'8" that barely got tackled and didn't make many tackles in those games, but they either scored or supported tries that made them sprint, 50, 60, 90 meters in some cases where they were like going really hard. So how we dealt with those guys, that wasn't seen as a hard game, but neurally for those guys that are hitting top speed for big chunks, that's what you're dealing with the following week. So those 3-4 guys that did those crazy amount of speed meters in that game, hey, they need to be dealt with differently to some of the other guys that never got out of a jog,
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that's where individualizing it, right, becomes so important, and the ability to have that and the ability to articulate that point. Because what I find is even a lot of the lads, you really need to protect the honest players. I find, in my experience, the honest players you really need to protect. And I find that I'll pull lads from sessions or parts of sessions and they're looking at me with a level of disappointment because they want to train. You know what I mean? And I always think the biggest gift I can ever give a player is the ability to play the game. It's not about me and it's not about numbers. It's not about me trying to prove my worth or my position by talking about how I've improved someone's 1RM on something or blah, blah, blah. It's not about that. It's about the player and it's about their development. When I hear this long-term athletic development model, I even hate to hear that. It should be just long-term person model. You know what I mean? It's all about developing the person over X amount of time. And I think that the theme of everything to this point has been on the player, right? But my question to you is, and this is what I think doesn't get enough recognition, or this is what I think we don't speak about enough. We speak an awful lot about monitoring players' training loads and about looking after the player, right? What about coach burnout? What about monitoring the load of the coach and when to push and when to pull? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Man, I accrue annual leave every year because I don't want to go away from it. You know, like coaching's what I wake up for. Like for me, there's, you know, my father and certainly the first coach I worked for, Daniel Anderson at the Warriors, he had a massive work ethic as well. But I think once you understand what you're doing it for, like I rarely feel fatigued, or even when I feel physically or mentally tired, the fire for me is still burning every day, because I feel like I've got a lot to improve on, and there's things out there I haven't even thought of yet that I want to know about, and I want to try and track it down somehow. And I constantly feel like, hey, what can I do for that player? How can I help him have a better day? How can I make him, you know, in some cases go home from training feeling better, and send him a voice message and say, hey man, good session, or, you know, never mind that was part of the process. You know, it's never about me. It's about the people I represent, and trying to help young men to fulfill their rugby league dreams, but also to be a better person, a better citizen, make the world a better place. So for me, like I don't really personally, I can't buy into that coach burnout too much, because I just never really have felt a day where I didn't want to coach or be part of that team environment. I mean, even when shit hits the fan and you're not sure about if you're getting paid or going to have a job or whatever, like I still want to do it. Like my wife says, hey, why don't you just have a break? And I'm like, there's no days off. Like for me, there's no day where I don't think about my coaching, try and work on my coaching, you know, wake up, roll out of bed because I'm a coach. Like even the few times where I haven't had a job, almost every day, there was a couple of days probably during that time where I thought, but mostly, you know, the vast, very much, you know, 98, 99% of the time, I'm jumping out of bed for it, man. So, but in saying that, I am aware of it, and not everyone's sort of wired the same way. You know, staying up all night or getting up at 3 a.m. to watch video and whatever, like that's never been a problem to me. But for others, it is. They're not wired the same way. So I try and keep a close check on my stuff, because my staff have jobs. They have real jobs, and then they invest, you know, lots of time, and they're sort of nearly full time in some capacity, but not being rewarded for it financially. That I do work hard on, hey, you don't need to come in today. You know, we don't have a match this weekend. We've got a bye week. Hey, have a day off, or how you're traveling, or can that guy cover that session for you so you can have an early night, take your missus out for dinner, whatever. And just trying to really, like we've talked a lot about players, as you said, but I feel I love coaching players, but I love coaching coaches and helping coaches along the journey as well. So showing coaches, if you want to be an NRL coach, you've got to work like an NRL coach before you are that NRL coach. Like I'm not an NRL coach yet, but my work ethic and desire is ready for that. So I'm practicing doing that until someone gives me the job. So depending on what the coach's dreams are, if they want to be a coach, but they have to work a regular job, it's a balancing act for sure. But at the end of the day, if your desire and your passion and craving, your purpose is about being a coach to lead men, well, you've got to find time to invest in it and to make yourself better so that you can deliver a better product to your players. So I'm conscious of different coaches need different sort of maintenance and support with that stuff as well. And I would say for any coach that's sort of watching it and thinking about being a professional coach is that choose your partner very carefully, because that is a huge part of once you got that obsession, that bug of, or maybe bug's not the right word to say at the moment, but that that passion for coaching and being in a team sport environment, if you don't have the support at home, it can't be productive, and your relationship will either break or your coaching will, one or the other.
Yeah, there has to be there definitely has to be a big support network around you, because between travel and between training, and of course the other side of that is there's a high element of insecurity in coaching as well, isn't there? Like it's a 2 or 3 year term. If you go in as an assistant coach, then the chances are, if the head coach gets knocked out or gets fired, the chances are that you're going to go as well. Like, you know what I mean? And then there's an awful lot of travel involved, and there's a lot of, you know what I mean, uprooting your family and setting up somewhere else. So you have a lot of those constraints, and you have a lot of those issues around it as well, don't you?
Yeah, like my partner and I have moved from, my wife, we've moved from Newcastle to Sydney to Auckland to the Gold Coast in Queensland to Bradford to Newcastle to now being Brisbane. I had a few moves before that as well. I've been to the UK and New Zealand a couple of times before that as well. So, it's a lifestyle. It's such a rewarding thing, but as you said, you're on the knife's edge a little bit. I've been through those times of sort of stressing about, hey, will I have a job? What happens if we don't win? All that sort of stuff. But that really doesn't impact me anymore. Like, the pressure I put on myself is just by trying to deliver a better product and make guys have a good experience.
Yeah.
Give them a moment to remember, often, not just whether they won the game or not, but, you know, at training, trying to create those moments for guys. That's sort of what I live for, and the rest will take care of itself as far as employment goes.
Excellent. Just the one thing that I kind of didn't touch on here was the word culture. Okay, like, I walk into dressing rooms all the time, and I see, you know, signs up on the walls, and you see these buzzwords, but more often than not, you'll play a team that team doesn't represent those signs that you've just seen in the home dressing room or whatever, you know. And I think that sometimes in a quest to push culture, okay, it can actually do more damage than good, because, you know what I mean, if there's a sign, or if there's a symbol, or if there's a word, or if there's some form of representation that your team wants to work by or train by or be identified with, and if the actions don't reflect that word or that sign or whatever that is, then there's a lack of integrity, right? Because integrity is the difference between what you say and what you do. And if you have a lack of integrity, then, you know what I mean, subconsciously throughout the group, there's you know what I mean, there's an element of this not being authentic, right? And, you know what I mean, when you don't have that, you don't have trust, and you don't have buy-in, right? So in terms of developing a culture, okay, what are your thoughts around that? Because, you know what I mean, whether we know it or not, we're developing a culture within our group anyway. It mightn't be positive, it might be negative, but there is a culture there, okay? But in terms of a coach for the first time coming into a team, okay, how would you approach it? You know, what would be your process around it? Is it something that you would like to happen slowly and organically by you putting some small pieces in place? Or is it something that you like to just overhaul and you want to actually consciously address?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really deep, the depth that you want to go to with culture. Now, I tend to talk a lot more about environment rather than culture, because I think culture is it's a good word, and I think at some level, in some sort of origins, it just means to care. So in the sense of human behavior and whatnot, if you put it down to care, well, you can feel that. You can definitely see it by how people interact with each other. How you get that environment or culture to be how you want it to be is not the same. So for me, when I had the crack at the Bulls, establishing that culture with guys from the north of England who are full-time rugby league players is different to semi-professional rugby league players that are from Sydney, Brisbane, Auckland, from out the countryside, some from the city, you know. So I don't believe that it's sort of, I've got some principles and philosophy and morals and behaviors and whatnot that I take with me wherever I go, but it's having a feel for what the situation is. If you get a job halfway through a season, how can you have the impact on the culture, as opposed to when you get the job at the end of the season where you got a chance to build your own roster. There's lots of factors to go into the culture. In the end, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of feeling, it's a way of behaving, relationships, it's how we act, it's how we carry ourselves. So all those things are visible, and I always refer to our guys, like, don't talk about culture, show me it. Like, and as staff, you know, our staff will all say, oh, we've got a great culture here. New staff come here and go, oh, there's a great culture here. And I always say, what can you see? Like, what is that? Oh, they're just so friendly and polite. You know, one of our managers for our lower grades team, he couldn't believe how they all said hello to him and they all picked up their rubbish at the end of this, you know, at the end of the session. They're the things, the actions and the things that you can see are more than the words on the wall or the mantra or the whatever. Like, we're actually going down the path of having one word this year that we're going to refer all of our actions and behaviors back towards, in different categories of how we play the game, how we interact with each other, how we socialize away from our sport. It was always going to be coming back to this one word, but we had plenty of actions to direct towards that. But you walk into our gym and that's the only thing that's our culture. That's the Norse Devils is our culture. That's what we are. That's our environment. Come in and you'll see the actions that replicate that feeling or that way of interacting and that behavior with each other. And a big part of that, like we referred to earlier, about building those little relationships and connections all the time, saying hello to everyone takes you a few minutes, or, you know, if you're in France and you've got to give everyone a kiss or whatever, like that takes a lot of time, but it's worth it, building those connections. Something I learnt, and Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski of Team USA and Duke University, like, he talks about standards rather than rules. I think a lot of culture building is, you know, that you read or hear about, it's creating these rules and we're going to make everyone accountable for these rules. Where Coach K talked about the standards. So the standard that we said is you say hello to everyone. So you don't look at the ground, you make eye contact. You know, to use the All Blacks term about sweeping the sheds, you clean up your shit, like you clean up your mess. They are standards. They're assumed behaviors. Now, we never assume. We always have to keep track and keep on top of things. But rather than rules, like you're supposed to only do 50 miles an hour here, but everyone does 60. Rules are there to be broken, where standards are, that's our expectation. That's what we do. That's what we are. So we're on time. If something happens, we tell someone that we're going to be late. We get better. We sweep the sheds. We respect our opportunity and our environment. I think that, and saying hello, like I talked about, those things for me help create those relationships, those actions and behaviors, which make it a place where you want to come to be part of. And as you know, the more you come to training, the more you're there on time, the more you stay back or you get there early, the better you get. The more you do, the better you get, the more you can do with your life, whether it be, you know, winning games or making more money or meeting better people or being the leaders for the next brigade. And that's what we're all doing. We're just filling the jersey until we pass it on to the next person. And that's really how we want to be thinking about culture, is leaving the place better than we found it. I'm passing this badge on or this jersey on to the next person to go, man, you take this and run with it, because this is this is a privilege and a great thing to be part of, I guess. So I don't know, man, you can talk forever about culture.
Yeah. And that's why.
Any other points that you want to touch on there? Or?
Yeah, that's why I was actually slow to bring it up, because I knew we'd spend a lot of time talking about it, like, you know. And I think that most people start with trying to work on, you know what I mean, this all-encompassing term of culture without trying to build relationships or connection or develop themselves as coaches either, because everything starts with you as a coach. You know what I mean? You're setting the temperature on each session. You're setting the connection on each session. Just in terms of including the wider community, parents, family, a thing that we have done, I've done it with 2 or 3 teams I've been with, is I've ran appreciation days. So what I've done is I've got the players to cook breakfast for their girlfriends or their wives or their partners and their mothers, their parents, whatever it is, just as a way to say thanks. Because, you know, I know that these players are going to rely an awful lot on the connections within their own homes throughout the season. So it's, number one, it's a way of me to allow the whole greater group to interact and get to know each other. But it's also a way for me to get the people at home to actually appreciate what we're doing as well, if that makes sense, because, you know what I mean, it is a long season. So like what we've done essentially is I've handed it completely over to the players. It's completely up to the players to look after it. They organize it. They organize the food. They organize the venue. They organize the setting. They organize the MC for the night. They organize everything. Management just step back and observe. And it's empowering the players, first of all. And secondly, when the parents or the girlfriends or the partners come in, they're totally waited on. They sit down. They're just falling over them with enthusiasm. And, you know what I mean, it allows them to interact among themselves as well. So have you ever done anything like that, or what are your thoughts on something like that?
Man, that's epic. I've just written that down. I'm gonna do that next opportunity I get, for sure. I'm very big on creating that. It's not about us just as this team. We're always representing something bigger. So, you know, one thing we did last year when it was our old boys day at North Devils, so all the old, you know, former players, there's a good couple of hundred come for a dinner or for a lunch, sorry, and then have a few beers and then watch the game. So at the end of that game, we went up into the bar area, which is at the, you know, on the end of the field, and the boys were still in their kit. They hadn't been in the sheds or anything. We went and sung the song with them, and obviously that rekindled their connection with our club. Some of them, you know, don't come back very often, but they, you know, when they did, they felt like these guys respect what came before them. That kind of stuff, I think, creating rituals or that's something, you know, the All Blacks are big on creating the rituals, like with your appreciation day. That would become something that you do, you know, annually, monthly, whatever it is that you can do. I think creating those events where you're making people feel respected, feel part of something that's much bigger than just them, whether that be going out of the way for a jersey presentation for a debutante, or bringing someone back from a previous era to speak to the players, all of those kind of things. But I love that appreciation day concept, man. That's really cool. I've written that down, man. Thanks for that.
Ah, Jesus, no, there's no panic. All right, listen, we've been on nearly an hour, okay, and I'm very aware of your time, and I'm very grateful for you for sharing your knowledge, right? If we were just to finish on this one last thing, okay? So I know that you're a lifelong learner, okay? I know that you're always honing your craft, and you're always looking for ways to improve yourself as a person and also as a coach, right? And I know you have quite an extensive library, and you're a keen reader, okay? So what would be your top 5 coaching books? Or sorry, we won't even say top 5, okay? Because we're just going to say top 3 coaching books. You know, because for myself, selfishly, I'd like to know, and obviously so we could share with the listener.
Yeah, man. That's a tough one. I think it might have been Brett Bartholomew, who's got a great book, Conscious Coaching. I think I heard him on a podcast first. Was my first discovery, and he may have talked about every book is a coaching book. and I've heard that, being said by lots of coaches. So every book you read can have a reference to coaching and how you can be a better product to give to your people. It's a hard one. That's a really hard one. I would say from a pure, a coaching and how you set your club up and the principles, a book called The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. That's not a new book. That's quite old. There's a more recent one, The Cubs Way, I found really, really good. That was a good connection between owner, general manager, and coach, all connected and on the same path about rebuilding an organization. So from a sort of club building point of view, I would say those books. Starts with Why and Switch by Dan and Chip Heath. Dan and Chip Heath have got some great books. Those books are probably great on how you're thinking about coaching from a bigger perspective. Sacred Hoops was Phil Jackson's book that I talked about earlier. That was an eye-opener one for me to consider mindfulness, and I'd never, even contemplated meditation or breathing as a way to live or coach or anything. So that's probably been huge. But on any given day, I can pick up another book and probably more topically. Sorry, I probably should. We finished on culture there. There's a book, The Culture Code by Dan Coyle. That's a cracker. It's got some great stories about sport, about business. It's and he's just such a great author, that dude. So we'll stop there. Otherwise, we'll talk about books. Yeah,
that's the same Daniel Coyle who wrote The Talent Code. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. He has some good stuff. Actually, it's ironic you should say, and we'll close on this. I had never heard that expression before. That every book is a chance to learn about coaching and so forth. I was going to London last year, and I had nothing to read on the way over, and I was in the airport, and I just picked up a book. I forget the author, but it was 101 Things I Learned at Architectural School. Okay, like so far removed now from coaching or sport or strength and conditioning or strength or anything, So I said, yeah, I'll have a read of this, just something different. And there was something in it called the frequency and effect model, okay? And he spoke about using this frequency effect model, right? So you have frequency on the x-axis and you have effect on the y-axis. And he broke it into 4 quadrants. So essentially you could apply this to any part of your life, and he applied it to his study, and it was phenomenal. So you could have the bottom left quadrant could have been someone that you meet quite frequently, but they have a minimal effect on you, right? But then on the upper right quadrant, you could have someone that you actually don't meet frequently, but they have a massive effect on you, okay? So I started to apply that in conversations with people and even into programming for people. You know what I mean? That simple frequency effect model. I'll share it with you. I'll share it at some stage. And again, it just validates the point you just made a minute ago.
Yeah, man, that's even in our relationship, Adrian, we don't speak in depth. This is most in depth we've ever conversed. But your work and what you share has had a supportive impact on me, in the last few years that we've sort of been in. So we wouldn't fall into that frequency thing, but the impact that our engagement has, man, is awesome for me. And I enjoyed listening to your podcast. The first podcast, I think it was the other day, about breathing, man. I love that stuff. So appreciate it.
Yeah, no, come here, Rohan. I appreciate the call. I appreciate you taking your time. I think it's just about 6 o'clock in the evening over in Brisbane now. So it's time to get the kids to bed, which is our first and primary job, isn't it?
That's the one, the never-ending job.
Yeah, the most important one too, isn't it?
The hardest, the most satisfying, the most time-consuming, everything. But you wouldn't change it, would you?
No, not at all. Rohan, come here. I really want to thank you for your time, boss. And we'll definitely do this again, and we'll definitely touch base again. And hopefully the next time we chat, the environment around the world will be quite different, and we'll be back to doing what we do and what we enjoy most, which is coaching and improving ourselves and the people around us.
100%, man. Like I look forward to catching up, and I look forward to, following your work and keeping positive through this time, and just working on our coaching and being ready for our players when we get that chance to kick off again.
100%. Rohan, cheers, my man.
Cheers, brother.
Thank you.
No worries, bro. Thank you.
Cheers, boss.